Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something incredibly personal, something we all feel. That moment when you're soaring, feeling absolutely on top of the world, or, the flip side, that heavy drag when motivation just feels miles away. Is it just a mood? Or is there something more complex going on, like an intricate, buzzing chemical ballet constantly unfolding right inside your brain?
Oh, it's definitely a chemical ballet and a very, very sophisticated one at that. Our brains are these amazing chemical factories, constantly orchestrating the symphony of signals that shape, well, pretty much everything. Our perceptions, our emotions, our actions.
Right.
That complex inner world is precisely what we're diving into today.
Absolutely. And you've heard the terms, right? The happiness hormones, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, they get tossed around everywhere, from self-help books to fitness articles. But what do they really do beyond the catchy buzzwords? What's the actual scientific reality behind these really powerful molecules?
Yeah, and that's our mission today. We want to equip you, the curious listener, with a more nuanced, evidence-based understanding of these crucial neurochemicals. We'll explore how they're made, their surprisingly specific functions, and critically, we'll assess this burgeoning world of biohacking your neurochemistry.
Biohacking. Yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and we want to move beyond the simplistic, often quite misleading ideas to reveal what's genuinely possible, what the science truly supports, and just as importantly, where the inherent limits actually lie.
And it sounds like we have quite a journey ahead. We'll start by really getting to know these molecules, right? Then uncover how they don't work in isolation, but interact in this complex, almost beautiful dance that shapes our mood and motivation.
Exactly, the interplay is key.
And after that, we'll zero in on some scientifically proven practical ways you can influence these chemicals, things like lifestyle, diet, daily habits.
Real actionable strategies.
Yes. And finally, we'll kind of ground ourselves in reality, looking at the limits imposed by our unique biology, and maybe why oversimplification in biohacking can actually be a bit of a slippery slope. So let's just jump right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so to kick things off, before we even get to those feel-good sensations everyone talks about, maybe we should clarify some fundamental terms, because they often get mixed up. We hear hormones and neurotransmitters used almost interchangeably sometimes. What's the actual, scientific distinction between them?
That's a great place to start. Understanding the difference really helps us appreciate their specific roles. Think of it like this. Both hormones and neurotransmitters are chemical messengers, right?
Sure.
But they operate on completely different scales.
Okay.
Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, they're typically involved in very rapid, very localized communication. They jump across these tiny gaps called synapses between individual neurons, delivering quick, precise instructions.
Like a direct message.
Exactly. It's like a high-speed, direct fiber optic connection. That's what allows your brain's intricate thought processes to happen at lightning speed.
Makes sense.
Hormones, on the other hand, are generally secreted by glands directly into your bloodstream. From there, they travel throughout your entire body, acting on many different target cells. So their effects are usually slower to appear but are far more widespread.
More like a broadcast signal.
Precisely, like a radio broadcast affecting many receivers across a broad area. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and kind of complicates things nicely.
Uh-huh.
Some molecules, like endorphins, actually have a dual role. They can act as neurotransmitters within specific brain circuits, influencing very particular neural functions, but they can also be released as peptide hormones into the circulatory system by the pituitary gland, influencing global physiological states across your entire body.
Wow. So they can do both.
They can do both. This versatility allows them to affect both precise brain functions and broader bodily sensations. It's a really elegant piece of biological engineering, actually.
Okay, so let's move on to dopamine. Probably the most famous of these chemicals, right? Often called the pleasure molecule. Is that the full story, though? Or what does the science really tell us about its primary role?
Yeah, it's definitely not the full story. That pleasure molecule label is a bit of an oversimplification, though it's understandable why it caught on. While dopamine is absolutely involved in the reward system, popular science often misses the nuance.
Okay.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the science overwhelmingly shows its primary roles are actually in motivation, learning, and guiding goal-directed behavior. It's less about the sensation of pleasure itself, the actual liking of something, and much more about the drive, the urge, the wanting to seek out pleasurable or rewarding outcomes.
Wanting versus liking, that's a key distinction.
It really is. And understanding how your brain makes this molecule is also important. Dopamine doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Your brain synthesizes it. It starts with an amino acid called L-tyrosine,
Which we get from food.
which we get from our diet, exactly. Or sometimes it's converted from another amino acid, phenylalanine. This L-tyrosine is then converted step by step into dopamine by specific enzymes in your brain. There's tyrosine hydroxylase, that's a key one, that's the rate-limiting step.
Meaning it controls the speed.
It controls the speed of the whole production line, basically.
Yeah.
Then dopa decarboxylase does the next step. The key takeaway for you, the listener, is that your diet directly fuels the production of this critical compound. No tyrosine, no dopamine.
Right. Where in the brain is this happening?
Good question. These dopamine-producing cells are concentrated in a couple of key areas, particularly in the midbrain. One area, the substantia nigra, is deeply involved in controlling our movement. That's the region heavily affected in Parkinson's disease. Another area, the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, is a central hub for reward and motivation. From these control centers, these dopamine neurons send signals out along specific pathways, like highways, to other brain regions. The nigrostriatal pathway for motor control, the mesolimbic pathway for reward. These networks essentially map out our movements and our deepest drives.
And what happens after it sends the signal?
Once dopamine is released into that synapse, that tiny gap between neurons, its action doesn't just linger indefinitely. It's quickly cleared away. Either it's sucked back up into the neuron that released it, that's called reuptake, or it's broken down by specific enzymes like MAO and COMT. This tight regulation ensures the signal is precise and controlled.
Okay, so it's less about the pleasure itself and more about the wanting, the drive.
Yeah.
How does dopamine actually work then to drive our motivation and help us learn? You mentioned something about reward prediction error.
Yes, the reward prediction error, or RPE. This is a really crucial concept. It gets right to the heart of dopamine's function in learning and motivation. Imagine your brain is constantly making predictions about the world, about the outcomes of your actions.
Okay.
The RPE concept tells us that bursts of dopamine aren't primarily released when you simply receive a reward you expected. Instead, they're released when that reward turns out to be better than expected. It's the positive surprise.
Ah, so it's about the unexpected good stuff.
Exactly. Think about it. You put some effort into something, maybe expecting a small payoff, but then boom, the result is fantastic, way better than you anticipated. That positive surprise, that unexpected bonus, that's when you get a significant dopamine burst.
Okay.
And conversely, if you expect a great reward and you get something less or nothing at all, the dopamine signal is actually suppressed below its baseline level. It's a negative prediction error.
So it signals both better and worse than expected.
Precisely. And this RPE signal is an incredibly powerful teaching mechanism for your brain. It strengthens the specific neural connections, the pathways that led to that positive, unexpected outcome. You know the saying, neurons that fire together, wire together?
Yeah.
Well, a key addition is, as long as they get a burst of dopamine right afterward, it's the reinforcement signal. It tells your brain, hey, whatever you just did, that worked out surprisingly well. Do more of that. It's how your brain learns to seek out those pleasant surprises and adapt your behavior for better future outcomes.
That makes so much sense for learning. And how does that tie back to motivation and the wanting versus liking?
It underpins it completely. This learning mechanism reinforces the behaviors that lead to rewards, creating the wanting, the drive to pursue them again. This helps explain why the brain system for wanting a reward, that dopaminergic drive, is actually distinct from the system for liking it or experiencing the pleasure itself, which involves other systems like opioids. This distinction is really important for understanding things like addiction. In addiction, the dopamine system can become hypersensitive, driving compulsive drug-seeking behavior. The wanting is incredibly strong, even if the drug itself no longer provides much pleasure or liking. The system is hijacked.
Wow. And you mentioned Parkinson's too. How does dopamine relate to movement difficulties there?
Yes, the motivational aspect extends even to our physical movements. In Parkinson's disease, the degeneration of those dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra leads to the characteristic symptoms like slowness of movement, stiffness, difficulty initiating actions. It's not just a physical inability. It's often described as a deficit in motor motivation. Even simple movements are perceived by the brain as requiring excessive effort. They feel too expensive energetically, leading to that slowness and lack of spontaneous movement.
So dopamine is kind of like assigning value or importance.
You could definitely think of it that way. It acts almost like a universal currency for motivational salience. It flags events, actions, or stimuli in your environment that are important, that deviate from expectation, and that warrant the allocation of your limited resources, whether that's focusing your attention, exerting physical effort, or strengthening neural pathways for learning. So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Dopamine is your brain's internal alert system saying, pay attention. This is important. This is worth pursuing, or maybe avoiding if the signal is suppressed. It's less about generating pure bliss and much more about the drive to achieve, explore, learn, and adapt.
That's a really clear picture of dopamine as maybe the accelerator driving us forward. So if dopamine is pushing us to seek rewards and learn from surprises, is serotonin more like the brain's internal guidance system? Or maybe the brakes, keeping us balanced and stable on our journey?
That's a fantastic analogy. Yes, serotonin, or 5-HT as scientists often call it, is absolutely crucial for maintaining stability. It's a different type of neurotransmitter, an endolimine, and it has incredibly widespread effects throughout the brain. You're right, it helps create that stable internal landscape, that equilibrium, which is necessary for our pursuits to be effective and sustainable in the long run.
And how is serotonin made? Similar to dopamine, starting with something from our diet.
Exactly the same principle. Like dopamine, serotonin is synthesized right there in your brain, and it starts with another essential amino acid, L-tryptophan. Emphasis on essential meaning your body can't make it, you absolutely must get it from the foods you eat.
Okay, so diet is critical here too.
Absolutely critical. Now, the vast majority of these serotonin-producing neurons originate in specific clusters deep in the brainstem in areas called the Raphe nuclei. From these central hubs, they send out these incredibly diffuse projections, like a vast network of tiny wires reaching almost every single area of the brain and even down into the spinal cord.
Wow, everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere. This anatomical arrangement is really key because it allows serotonin to exert a global modulatory influence on our mood, our thinking, our arousal levels. Basically, the overall tone of the brain.
So it's really reaching every corner, acting as a kind of master dial or maybe a dimmer switch.
Yeah.
What are its main jobs then, beyond just the vague idea of making us happy? How does it actually help with things like mood, sleep, appetite, and you even mentioned our social lives?
Yeah, its role in mood is quite different from dopamine's. Serotonin isn't really about actively generating happiness or euphoria. It's much more about acting as a crucial stabilizer and a buffer against negative emotions, against stress. When serotonin levels are low, or the system isn't functioning efficiently, that's strongly implicated in conditions like depression and anxiety, particularly for individuals who might have a genetic predisposition.
So it's more about resilience.
Exactly. It's about resilience, keeping us on an even keel, helping us weather the storms of life without getting completely derailed emotionally.
Okay. And the other roles, sleep, appetite.
This balancing role is evident across many basic biological functions, too. Serotonin is deeply involved in regulating your sleep-wake cycle. Interestingly, its neurons are actually most active when you're quietly awake. Their activity decreases during deep, slow-wave sleep, and they fall almost completely silent during REM sleep, the dreaming stage. So it plays a complex role, generally promoting wakefulness and helping to structure your sleep stages correctly. In terms of appetite, serotonin signaling, particularly in a brain region called the hypothalamus, plays a key role in promoting satiety, that feeling of fullness, and inhibiting further food intake, especially after you've eaten. It tells your brain, okay, you've had enough for now. It also plays a role in modulating your body's central clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, which governs your daily circadian rhythms, your natural sleep-wake pattern.
And the social aspect. That seems really interesting.
It is fascinating. In the social domain, serotonin's influence is remarkably sophisticated. It's not just about making us feel generally pro-social or friendly. Some compelling evidence suggests it modulates our moral judgment and behavior, specifically by increasing our aversion to personally harming others, even if doing so might lead to a greater good in some abstract sense.
Wow.
Yeah, this natural aversion to causing direct harm is arguably a cornerstone of social cooperation and trust, making it vital for us as intensely social creatures. Furthermore, the serotonergic system is central to how we cope with stress, particularly social stress, and how we navigate complex social hierarchies. It influences patience, impulsivity, and responses to unfairness.
So across all these diverse functions, mood, sleep, appetite, social interaction, is there a kind of unifying theme?
I think there is. A powerful unifying principle emerges. Serotonin acts as a master homeostatic regulator. It works across your physical and psychological states to create and maintain a predictable, stable internal environment. By stabilizing sleep, appetite, mood, and even the fundamental rules of social interaction, it allows you to function effectively. So what does this all mean for you? This internal equilibrium lets you shift your focus. Instead of constantly managing immediate reactive needs, which is often the domain where dopamine's wanting system is very active, serotonin allows for more considered long-term planning, building complex social bonds, and basically maintaining composure. It's about building a steady platform for all your other brain functions to operate smoothly.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Now, endorphins. This is the chemical that gets all the press for the runner's high, right? Everyone talks about how endorphins flood your system and make you feel amazing after a tough workout. How do they work? And is there maybe more to that post-workout euphoria than we generally assume? Is that story actually true?
Ah, the runner's high. This brings up a really crucial point because for decades, yes, that feeling was almost exclusively attributed to endorphins. And that idea is incredibly deeply entrenched in popular culture, in fitness magazines, everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, the scientific evidence has really forced a critical reevaluation of this. More recent research points pretty strongly towards a different system being the primary driver of the euphoric part of the runner's high.
Oh, really? Okay, tell me more. But first, what are endorphins exactly?
Right, let's clarify. Endorphins are a class of natural internal opioid peptides. The name itself actually comes from endogenous morphine, which tells you a lot about their function. They act similarly to opiate drugs like morphine.
No natural painkillers.
Exactly. Your body creates these natural painkillers in places like the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. They actually start as a larger precursor molecule called POMC, which gets chopped up into several active bits. Beta endorphin is the most studied and seems to be the most potent of these. These endorphin molecules then exert their effects by binding to specific opioid receptors, mu, delta, kappa receptors, which are found throughout your brain and your peripheral nervous system. When beta endorphin binds to these receptors, especially the mu opioid receptors, it produces very potent pain relief, sometimes even more powerful molecule for molecule than morphine itself.
Incredible. So they are definitely natural pain relievers.
Yeah.
And they do contribute to pleasure and that good feeling we associate with them then.
Yes, absolutely. Their primary and most well-established function is indeed analgesia, the suppression of pain perception. This is a key response to both physical pain and significant stress. But beyond just blocking pain, endorphins are associated with states of pleasure and even mild euphoria. They're released during activities like laughter, engaging in sexual activity, eating really palatable food. It's a crucial part of your body's natural reward system, contributing to that feeling of well-being.
Okay, so they do cause pleasure, but now the runner's high reevaluation you mentioned, what's the issue with the endorphin story there?
This is where it gets really interesting scientifically. The endorphin hypothesis for exercise-induced euphoria, while incredibly popular and intuitive, runs into a significant biochemical problem, the blood-brain barrier.
Ah, that protective barrier around the brain.
Exactly. Endorphins are relatively large molecules, they're peptides, and they're also hydrophilic, meaning they dissolve well in water but not so well in fats. This chemical structure makes it very difficult for them to efficiently cross the blood-brain barrier, which is essentially a tightly sealed fatty membrane designed to protect your central nervous system. So while strenuous exercise certainly does increase endorphin levels in your bloodstream, and this likely helps reduce peripheral muscle pain and discomfort, making you feel better physically in your body.
Like the soreness.
Yes, but it's highly unlikely that these circulating endorphins reach your brain in high enough concentrations to cause the significant mood shift, the euphoria, the anxiety reduction that people describe as the runner's high. They mostly stay outside the brain.
So if it's not primarily endorphins causing the mental high, what is it?
The more plausible candidates, based on current evidence, are endocannabinoids.
Like cannabis.
Exactly like the compounds in cannabis, but these are ones your own body produces naturally. Molecules like anandamide, its name comes from the Sanskrit word for bliss. Unlike endorphins, these endocannabinoids are small, and critically, they're lipophilic fat soluble. This means they can readily pass through the blood-brain barrier.
Okay, so there's evidence for this.
Yes, quite compelling evidence. Studies in both animals and humans have shown that moderate intensity endurance exercise significantly increases circulating levels of anandamide in the blood and presumably in the brain too. And crucially, pharmacological studies have provided direct tests. In mouse models, researchers found that the anxiety-reducing and pain-relieving effects of running could be blocked by drugs that specifically target cannabinoid receptors. But, and this is key, these effects were not blocked by drugs that block opioid receptors like naloxone, which would block endorphins.
So blocking cannabis-like receptors stopped the runner's high effects, but blocking opioid receptors didn't.
In those animal studies, yes. And this finding has been replicated in humans too, using similar drug-blocking approaches. People given naltrexone, an opioid blocker, still experience exercise-induced euphoria. This strongly suggests that the central runner's high experience, that characteristic feeling of reduced anxiety and elevated mood, is primarily mediated by your body's own endocannabinoid system, not mainly by endorphins.
Wow, okay. That is a huge shift in understanding for probably most people listening. So the euphoria isn't the endorphins we've all been told about, but a different chemical system altogether. What's the implication of this for how we think about biohacking our mood or just understanding ourselves?
Well, the persistence of the endorphin hypothesis in the public imagination, despite pretty strong scientific contradiction now, really highlights something important. It shows how appealing but overly simplistic narratives can take hold and mislead, especially in discussions around something as attractive as biohacking.
Right. We like simple stories.
We do. It's easy to latch on to a single chemical explanation, but the reality of our neurochemistry is often far more complex, more interconnected, and more nuanced than those simple stories allow. This is a really critical lesson as we consider trying to influence our own biology. The popular narrative isn't always the full scientific truth, and we need to be critical consumers of that information.
Definitely. We've covered a lot of ground already with dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, and now we've brought endocannabinoids into the mix. It's a truly amazing cast of chemical characters. Just to quickly recap from the great overview we have at our source material, we've got dopamine really driving motivation, reward prediction, motor control, serotonin acting as the great stabilizer for mood, sleep, appetite, social cognition, endorphins providing that vital analgesia, pleasure, stress reduction, especially peripherally, and then endocannabinoids stepping up for anxiolysis, that's anxiety reduction, analgesia too, and that central euphoria like the runner's high, each playing a vital, distinct, yet interconnected role in our brain's chemical symphony.
That's a perfect summary. It's all about the ensemble, not just the soloists.
So, yeah, it really sounds like our mood isn't just about one superstar chemical acting alone, like some kind of solo performer dominating the stage. It's much more like an orchestra, right? With all these different players, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, endocannabinoids working together, sometimes in harmony, maybe sometimes clashing a bit.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. Well-being and a stable mood are definitely not the product of a single neurochemical acting in isolation. That's a fundamental misunderstanding. Rather, they are emergent properties. They arise from the continuous, dynamic interplay, that complex symphony between multiple neuromodulatory systems. Understanding these intricate interactions is absolutely critical. It helps us appreciate your brain's amazing ability to maintain balance, its homeostasis, and it also helps us recognize the inherent limitations of trying to target any single molecule in isolation, which is often the goal of simplistic biohacking.
Okay, let's dive into those interactions. These two, dopamine and serotonin, they seem to have such different primary roles based on what you've said. One is kind of driving us forward, the accelerator, the other stabilizing us, maybe the steering or brakes. How do they actually work together, or maybe even against each other, in the brain? Is it a collaboration or a conflict?
Well, it's probably a bit of both, and what's truly intriguing here is how deeply intertwined they are. The brain systems that use dopamine and serotonin have extensive anatomical and functional connections. They talk to each other constantly. Serotonin-producing neurons, originating way back in those RAFI nuclei we mentioned, send projections widely and influence virtually all the major dopamine pathways, the ones involved in movement, motivation, reward, and even higher cognitive functions. It's a really complex regulatory dance.
So serotonin can influence dopamine and presumably vice versa.
Absolutely. The influence goes both ways, creating this dynamic balance. Historically, this interaction has often been framed as somewhat oppositional, kind of like your accelerator and brakes analogy. Dopamine is seen as driving approach behaviors, motivating action, exploration, the pursuit of rewards, taking risks. Serotonin, in contrast, is often associated with inhibition or withdrawal, promoting patience, inhibiting impulsive actions, increasing harm avoidance, and mediating our responses to potentially negative or aversive stimuli.
So like dopamine says go, serotonin says, whoa, hang on.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
According to this traditional model, the balance between these two systems helps dictate your behavioral strategy at any given moment. For instance, a state where serotonin function is low might release the brakes on the dopamine system, potentially leading to increased impulsivity, sensation seeking, maybe even aggression in some contexts. And many psychiatric conditions, certainly including depression, but also impulse control disorders, are thought to involve a dysregulation, a disruption of this delicate dopamine-serotonin balance.
Okay, that model makes intuitive sense. But you said, historically, has the thinking evolved?
It has. More recent research suggests the relationship is more nuanced than just simple opposition. It's likely both oppositional and synergistic, depending on the context and the specific brain circuits involved. While they often do have competing effects on behavior, both systems can actually encode information about rewards and punishments. But they seem to do so with different properties and, importantly, on different timescales. Well, remember how we talked about dopamine signaling, that signed reward prediction error, positive for better than expected, negative for worse than expected outcomes? That signal is very rapid, phasic, ideal for quickly reinforcing specific actions that just happened. Serotonin neurons, on the other hand, seem to signal something slightly different, perhaps more related to the average reward rate over time, or maybe an unsigned prediction error, essentially a slower surprise signal that flags any deviation from expectation, whether it's good or bad. This serotonin signal seems to rise and fall more slowly, potentially providing a more stable contextual backdrop against which those rapid, action-oriented dopamine signals operate.
So dopamine is the quick reaction, serotonin is the bigger picture context.
That could be one way to think about it, yes. It suggests a really sophisticated division of labor. The two systems work in concert, maybe sometimes competing, sometimes cooperating, to enable flexible, adaptive behavior in a world that's constantly changing and often unpredictable. So, for you, the listener, this means these two systems aren't just fighting, they're collaborating in a complex way to help you both chase your goals effectively and maintain internal calm and stability simultaneously. It's not strictly one or the other. It's about achieving a dynamic, functional interplay between drive and regulation.
Okay, so we've got dopamine driving us, serotonin stabilizing us, and they're in this complex dance. How do endorphins, our natural pain relievers and pleasure enhancers, fit into this orchestra? Do they also talk to dopamine, maybe influencing that drive system?
They absolutely do, and this interaction explains a really fascinating phenomenon. How the pleasure derived from pain relief or from other endorphin-releasing activities can become a powerful motivational drive in itself. It's a really elegant mechanism within your brain's circuitry.
How does it work?
Okay, so in many parts of the brain, especially in the reward pathways, there are neurons that release an inhibitory neurotransmitter called GABA. Think of these GABAergic neurons as essentially acting like brakes on your dopamine neurons, keeping their activity normally in check, preventing them from firing too wildly.
Right, keeping things under control.
Exactly. Now, when endorphins are released, say, during intense exercise or laughter, or even when taking opioid drugs, they bind to specific mu-opioid receptors that are located on these GABA-releasing neurons. And what does binding to those receptors do? It inhibits the GABA neurons. It stops them from releasing their GABA.
So endorphins stop the brakes.
Precisely. This process is called disinhibition. By reducing the GABA release, the endorphins effectively release the brakes on the dopamine neurons that those GABA cells were controlling. The result: an increase in dopamine production and release in key reward areas of the brain, like the nucleus accumbens.
So endorphins lead to more dopamine, indirectly.
Indirectly, exactly, by silencing the silencers. This mechanism is fundamental to why opioid drugs are so profoundly rewarding and, tragically, so addictive they tap directly into this pathway. But it's also how your natural endorphins contribute to feelings of well-being, pleasure, and motivation by giving that dopamine system a little boost via this disinhibition route.
That's incredible. It really shows how interconnected everything is.
It really does. This intricate web of interactions, dopamine, serotonin balance, endorphin modulation of dopamine via GABA, it underscores that critical principle we started with. Your mood, your motivation, your overall sense of well-being, it's an emergent property. It arises from a dynamic multi-system equilibrium. It's not about simply maximizing one chemical. Trying to do that is like trying to make an orchestra sound good by telling only the trumpets to play as loud as possible.
Right, you drown everything else out and ruin the harmony.
Exactly. It directly challenges that more is better logic that often underpins simplistic biohacking strategies. Those approaches frequently fail because they don't account for the complex, interconnected, self-regulating nature of your brain. The real goal isn't maximum volume from one instrument, it's achieving harmony and balance across the entire ensemble.
Okay, so if it's all about this delicate balance, this intricate interaction, this orchestra playing in harmony, what can we actually do in our daily lives to support this incredible system? Forget the hype for a second. What's the science behind real biohacks that actually work? How can we be better conductors of our own internal orchestra?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's where things get practical. The desire to actively improve our mental state, to feel better, is incredibly powerful, totally understandable. And while you see all sorts of exotic solutions and supplements grabbing headlines, the most robust, consistent scientific evidence points towards modulating fundamental biological inputs. Things our ancestors did naturally, primarily our diet, our level of physical exercise, and a range of environmental and behavioral factors. These are the real evidence-based levers we can actually pull to support our brain chemistry effectively and sustainably.
Right, let's start with something we all do, multiple times a day, hopefully. Eat. How does what we actually put on our plate affect these powerful neurochemicals we've been dissecting? Is it really as simple as eat happy foods?
It's only we're that simple. But what's truly fascinating here is how exquisitely sensitive neurotransmitter synthesis is to our diet, particularly to the availability of specific amino acid precursors, those building blocks we talked about. Your brain's production of serotonin and dopamine is directly dependent on the supply of L-tryptophan for serotonin and L-tyrosine for dopamine.
Right, the raw materials.
Exactly. Both of these amino acids come from your bloodstream and ultimately from the protein in the food you eat. And here's where it gets a bit counterintuitive, especially for serotonin. It's not just about how much of the precursor you eat.
What else is involved?
It's about competition. These crucial amino acids, tryptophan and tyrosine, have to compete with other similar amino acids, technically called large neutral amino acids, or LNAs, to get transported across the blood-brain barrier into your brain. Think of it like a crowded doorway with only limited space.
Okay, so they need to elbow their way in.
Pretty much. And tryptophan is usually present in dietary protein in much smaller quantities than its competitors, like leucine, isoleucine, and valine. So this leads to a really crucial and often surprising dietary principle. Consuming a high-protein meal, even though it's rich in tryptophan overall, paradoxically tends to decrease brain serotonin synthesis in the short term.
Wait, eating more protein makes less serotonin. How does that work?
Because that high-protein meal floods your bloodstream with all the amino acids, including huge amounts of those competing LNAs. Tryptophan, being the least abundant, gets crowded out at the blood-brain barrier's transport system. Its ratio, compared to the competitors, drops, and less of it actually makes it into the brain where it's needed to make serotonin.
Wow, okay. So what does help get tryptophan into the brain?
Now, for the real hack here, the one that works with your biology, consuming a meal that is rich in carbohydrates and relatively lower in protein can actually increase brain serotonin synthesis.
Carbohydrates, not protein.
Correct. Here's why. When you eat carbohydrates, your body releases insulin. Insulin helps clear most of those competing LNAs from your bloodstream by shunting them into peripheral tissues, like your muscles. But insulin has relatively little effect on tryptophan levels in the blood, partly because much of it is bound to a protein called albumin. So the insulin clears the competitors away, tryptophan faces less competition at the blood-brain barrier, its relative concentration effectively increases, and more of it gets transported into the brain to be converted into serotonin.
That is absolutely fascinating. So a bowl of pasta might actually be better for boosting serotonin than a steak in the short term.
In terms of facilitating tryptophan entry into the brain, yes, that's the mechanism. It clearly demonstrates that your brain's neurochemical state is profoundly influenced not just by what nutrients you consume, but crucially by the macronutrient balance of a meal and the hormonal responses like insulin that follow. Think about that next time you feel that calm feeling after a carb-rich meal. It might just be your serotonin levels getting a gentle boost.
Incredible. It's definitely not just about getting the building blocks, but understanding the intricate logistics of how they actually reach your brain. What else, beyond these amino acid precursors and meal composition, impacts our brain's chemistry through diet?
Well, beyond the precursors, effective neurotransmitter synthesis also requires a whole host of essential cofactors. Think of them as the tools the enzymes need to do their job. Many of these are vitamins and minerals obtained from your diet.
Like what?
For example, folate, which is vitamin B9, and the mineral magnesium are both crucial cofactors for enzymes involved in the synthesis pathways of both serotonin and dopamine. Deficiencies in these micronutrients can directly impair neurochemical production and have been strongly linked to mood disorders like depression. So ensuring you get enough leafy greens, legumes, nuts, and seeds, which are rich in folate and magnesium, is more important for your brain chemistry than you might think.
Okay, B vitamins and minerals. What about fats?
Ugh. Fats are critical too, especially omega-3 fatty acids. These are found abundantly in oily fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, as well as in things like walnuts and flax seeds. Omega-3s are absolutely critical structural components of healthy neuronal membranes, the outer skin of your brain cells. They need to be fluid and flexible to function properly. Plus, omega-3s possess powerful anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body and, importantly, in the brain.
Inflammation. I hear more and more about that linking to mood.
Exactly. Chronic low-grade inflammation is increasingly recognized as a significant contributing factor, maybe even a causal factor in some types of depression. So a diet rich in anti-inflammatory omega-3s can help protect the brain, support neuronal function, and indirectly support healthy neurotransmitter balance.
Makes sense. Anything else major on the diet front?
Yes, one huge area we absolutely cannot forget is the gut-brain axis. This is a major frontier in neuroscience and mental health research right now. It's mind-blowing, really. The vast majority of your body's serotonin, around 95%, is actually produced not in your brain but in your gut by specialized cells in your intestinal lining.
95%. What's it doing down there?
Primarily, it's regulating gut motility, the contractions that move food along. But the gut doesn't just make serotonin, it also talks to the brain constantly via nerves, hormones, and the immune system.
Yeah.
And the health of your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria and other microbes residing in your intestines, has a profound two-way impact on both your peripheral and your central neurochemistry.
So the gut bugs influence brain chemicals.
Absolutely. They influence inflammation levels, they can produce neurotransmitter precursors, they can even produce neurotransmitters themselves that signal to the brain. A healthy, diverse gut microbiome supported by things like probiotic and prebiotic-rich foods, think yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, plus lots of high-fiber vegetables and whole grains that feed the good bugs, seems to be essential for maintaining a balanced internal environment that directly supports your mental well-being. So what does this all mean for you? Your gut is literally constantly talking to your brain about your mood, making gut health a crucial, non-negotiable part of the equation for your overall well-being. Hashtag tag 3.2, the neurobiology of physical exercise.
Okay, diet is clearly huge and complex. Let's move to another ancient foundational practice, exercise. We all intuitively know it makes us feel good mentally and physically, but what's actually happening chemically in our brains when we hit the gym, go for that run, or even just take a brisk walk? What are the chemical secrets behind that post-exercise glow or stress relief?
Exercise is truly one of the most powerful, reliable, and comprehensive modulators of brain function and neurochemistry that we know of. It's honestly like a potent, readily available, non-pharmacological antidepressant and anxiolytic rolled into one. The impact is incredibly wide-ranging and touches multiple systems simultaneously.
How so? What's it doing to dopamine and serotonin, for instance?
Well, regular physical activity has been consistently shown to increase the synthesis, the release, and even the efficiency of receptors for both dopamine and serotonin in various brain regions. This can directly help alleviate common symptoms of depression, such as anhedonia, that inability to feel pleasure, and the low motivation or fatigue that often accompanies it. It literally boosts the systems involved in drive and mood stability.
Okay, boosting the chemicals. What else?
Exercise also significantly enhances neuroplasticity. That's your brain's incredible ability to adapt, change its structure, and reorganize itself in response to experience. Exercise promotes the growth of new neurons, especially in areas like the hippocampus, which is crucial for learning and memory and often affected by depression. It also strengthens existing neural connections. This ultimately improves cognitive function, things like focus and memory, and enhances emotional regulation, making you better able to cope with stress.
And what about the runner's high chemicals? Endorphins and endocannabinoids.
Right. As we discussed earlier, moderate intensity endurance exercise is a particularly potent stimulus for the release of those brain-penetrating endocannabinoids like anandamide. These are now believed to be the primary mediators of the anxiolytic, the anxiety-reducing, and the euphoric effects that classic runners' high feeling.
So it is the endocannabinoids doing that heavy lifting for mood boost.
It seems so for the central effects. While endorphins are also released, particularly during very high intensity or prolonged exercise, their main role appears to be more focused on peripheral analgesia, meaning reducing the sensation of pain or discomfort in your muscles and body, rather than directly creating that feeling of euphoria in the brain. Though reducing bodily discomfort certainly contributes to feeling better overall. The combined effect of all these neurochemical changes boosted dopamine and serotonin, enhanced neuroplasticity, release of endocannabinoids, plus peripheral endorphin effects is a significant reduction in perceived stress and anxiety, a measurable improvement in overall mood, and an enhanced sense of well-being and capability.
That's a really strong case for getting active.
Hmm.
Does the type of exercise matter much, or how hard or long we work out? Is there a sweet spot for optimizing our brain chemistry through movement?
That's an important nuance, and yes, the neurochemical response to exercise isn't monolithic. It definitely depends on the nature of the activity, the type, intensity, and duration. Generally speaking, chronic, moderate-intensity exercise seems to be most effective for promoting long-term structural and functional adaptations in the brain, like that neuroplasticity boost. Think activities you can sustain: brisk walking, cycling, swimming, dancing, done consistently over time. This kind of regular, sustained effort seems to build lasting brain resilience and mood stability.
So consistency beats intensity for long-term brain health.
For many of the neuroplasticity and mood stabilizing benefits, yes. That's not to say intense exercise is bad, but exhaustive overtraining exercise can actually have negative effects. It can lead to central fatigue, potentially through the hyperactivation and subsequent depletion of those very monoamine systems like dopamine and serotonin we're trying to support. Finding the right balance is key.
And what about intensity and endorphins?
We do tend to see that higher intensity workouts are generally associated with a greater release of endorphins. This is likely a direct response to the increased physical stress and discomfort involved the body releasing its natural painkillers to cope with the challenge. So if you're really pushing hard and feeling that physical burn, endorphins are likely working hard to dull that sensation in your muscles and keep you going.
Makes sense. It's not just chemistry, though, right? Exercise has psychological benefits, too.
Absolutely. We shouldn't discount the powerful psychological effects. There's the sense of mastery and accomplishment you get from setting and achieving fitness goals. There's improved self-esteem and body image. And exercise provides a valuable, often very effective, distraction from negative thought patterns and rumination. All of these psychological factors contribute significantly to its overall positive impact on mental health, working hand in hand with the neurochemical changes. So what does this all mean for you? It's not just about pushing your physical limits to exhaustion. Finding the right type and intensity of exercise that you can sustain and ideally genuinely enjoy is absolutely key to reaping these profound, long-lasting neurochemical and psychological benefits. For your brain, consistency and enjoyment are often more valuable than extreme sporadic effort that leads to burnout. Hashtag TAG 3.3 environmental and behavioral modulation.
Okay, beyond diet and exercise, which are clearly powerful foundations, what about our environment and our daily habits? Can things that seem simpler, like getting enough sunlight or practicing meditation or even just connecting with other people, can they really shift our brain chemistry in meaningful ways?
Oh, absolutely. Our brains evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to external cues and behavioral practices. These seemingly simple factors can be leveraged incredibly powerfully to support our neurochemical balance. They are, in essence, ancient, evolutionarily conserved hacks that align perfectly with our underlying biology, and we often drastically underestimate their profound impact in our modern lives.
Let's start with sunlight then. How does just being outdoors affect things like serotonin?
Exposure to natural light, particularly bright light in the morning, is a hugely powerful regulator of your entire biological system, including your serotonin levels. Light, especially the blue spectrum light, around 480 nanometers, which is abundant in daylight, is the primary environmental cue, what scientists call a Zeitgeber, a time giver, that synchronizes your brain's master internal clock. This clock is located in a tiny region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
And why is that clock so important for mood?
A stable, well-timed circadian rhythm, driven by that master clock, is absolutely essential for mood regulation. When this rhythm gets disrupted, maybe through insufficient daytime light exposure, spending too much time indoors, or conversely, getting excessive bright artificial light exposure late at night, it's strongly linked to mood disorders, including depression and bipolar disorder. Beyond its role in setting your internal clock, sunlight appears to have a more direct effect, too. Evidence suggests it directly stimulates serotonin synthesis and release in the brain.
Directly boosts serotonin.
That's what the research indicates. This direct link helps explain the phenomenon of seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, where people tend to experience depressive symptoms during the darker winter months with less sunlight. So a very practical tip for you, the listener, is that aiming for even 10-15 minutes of daily sun exposure, particularly in the morning hours if possible, without sunglasses for a portion of it, can be a simple, free, and surprisingly effective strategy to boost serotonin levels, anchor your circadian rhythm, and improve your mood. It's like a natural daily dose of chemical balance.
Okay, sunlight is key. What about practices like meditation and mindfulness?
Okay.
There's a lot of talk about them, but is there real science behind their effects on brain chemistry?
Yes, there is. These practices, which are essentially ancient techniques for training attention, cultivating awareness, and regulating emotion, are no longer just alternative ideas. Modern neuroscience is providing robust evidence that they have demonstrable, measurable effects on both brain chemistry and brain function.
Like what kind of changes?
Well, studies using techniques like neuroimaging and measuring neurochemicals have revealed that regular meditation practice can lead to increased levels or activity of key neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and also GABA. GABA is the brain's primary inhibitory, calming neurotransmitter. It helps quiet down excessive neuronal firing. Simultaneously, meditation practice is often associated with reduced levels of the stress hormone cortisol.
So it boosts the good chemicals and lowers the stress ones.
In many cases, yes, and it goes beyond just chemicals. On a brain network level, meditation is associated with decreased activity in something called the default mode network, or DMN. This is a network of brain regions that's highly active when our minds are wandering, thinking about ourselves, the past, the future, basically, mind wandering and rumination. It's often found to be overactive in conditions like depression and anxiety. Think of it as the brain's internal chatter or overthinking circuit.
And meditation quiets that down.
It seems to help modulate it, yes. Concurrently, meditation often increases activity and connectivity in other important regions, like the prefrontal cortex, involved in executive control and focus, and areas like the insula, which is crucial for interoception. That's the awareness of one's own internal bodily sensations and emotional state, becoming more aware of your internal world. So, what does this all mean for you? It's not just about chilling out passively. Mindfulness and meditation are active forms of mental training that can literally rewire your brain and measurably shift its chemistry towards a state of greater balance, focus, and resilience over time.
Fascinating. Okay, one more major area. Social connection. We always hear it's important, but is there a neurochemical basis for why being with people feels good and why loneliness feels so bad?
Absolutely. Humans are fundamentally profoundly social creatures. Our brains evolved in the context of intense social interdependence. Social interaction isn't a luxury for us, it's a biological necessity, much like food or sleep. And yes, there's a deep neurochemical basis for this. Positive social connection is a powerful trigger for the release of multiple neurochemicals that contribute directly to feelings of well-being and bonding.
Which chemicals are involved?
Well, meaningful social bonding and interaction are processed by your brain as highly rewarding stimuli. They strongly activate the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, that same pathway involved in motivation and reward we discussed earlier. This activation reinforces social behavior and contributes to the pleasure and motivation we derive from positive connection. Socializing, particularly things like laughter, synchronized activity, or supportive touch, also triggers the release of endorphins. This endorphin release is thought to be a key neurochemical mechanism underlying the formation and maintenance of strong social bonds, that feeling of closeness and trust.
Ah, endorphins for bonding.
Yes. The effect is so potent that some fascinating research has shown that individuals with larger, more diverse social networks actually tend to have a higher tolerance for physical pain, potentially mediated by this enhanced baseline endorphin activity. And serotonin levels also seem to be positively influenced by social engagement and perceived social rank or support, contributing to a sense of well-being and stability within a social context.
So the takeaway here.
A key takeaway for you, the listener, is that loneliness isn't just a sad feeling. It can represent a state of genuine neurochemical deprivation, impacting dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. Meaningful connection with others, friends, family, community is a potent fundamental hack for your overall neurochemical health and well-being. The collective evidence from all these domains, diet, exercise, sunlight, mindfulness, social connection, reveals a powerful truth. The real hack, the most effective way to modulate your neurochemistry, lies in understanding the often non-obvious scientific mechanisms behind these evolutionarily conserved ancient practices, and then consciously, consistently integrating them into your modern life. It's about working with your fundamental biology to counteract the deficits often imposed by our contemporary lifestyles, the processed foods, the sedentary existence, the indoor lighting, the chronic stress, the social isolation. It's about respecting your brain's fundamental needs.
Okay, we've talked about all these amazing evidence-based ways we can influence our neurochemistry through our lifestyle choices: diet, exercise, sunlight, connection. But let's bring it back to that idea of biohacking. Can we truly optimize or completely control our brain chemistry? Like tuning a finely calibrated machine to perfection? Or are there inherent limits to what we can actually achieve? Is perfect control even possible or desirable?
This brings up such a crucial point, and it requires a dose of realism. While we absolutely can profoundly influence our neurochemistry through these lifestyle factors, the popular biohacking idea of achieving complete control or some kind of absolute optimization is, scientifically speaking, largely a fallacy. Our ability to modulate our own biology is fundamentally constrained by two major factors: our unique genetic blueprint and the inherent staggering complexity of the brain as a dynamic, self-regulating system. We are simply not infinitely malleable machines.
So you're saying what works brilliantly for one person might not work at all, or might even backfire for someone else, simply because we're all built a little bit differently at a fundamental genetic level. This sounds like it explains why some general health advice feels universal, but then some really specific hacks or supplements seem to only work for a small subset of people.
Precisely. You've hit the nail on the head. A one-size-fits-all approach to neurochemical modulation, especially when it comes to specific interventions beyond basic healthy living, is almost doomed to fail for many individuals because of significant inter-individual genetic variation. Tiny differences in our DNA sequence, what scientists call single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, in the genes related to neurotransmitter synthesis, transport breakdown, and receptor sensitivity create distinct neurochemical profiles right from birth. These genetic variations establish your unique neurochemical landscape, influencing how your brain naturally functions and how it will respond to various inputs.
Can you give some examples of these genetic differences?
Sure. A classic, well-studied example involves a gene called COMT. This gene provides instructions for making an enzyme, catechol O-methyltransferase, which is really important for breaking down dopamine, especially in the prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive control center. Now, there's a common variation in this gene known as Val158met.
Val and Met.
Right. If you inherit the Val version, you produce a high-activity COMT enzyme that clears dopamine relatively quickly from the synapse. These individuals, sometimes nicknamed warriors, tend to be more resilient under high-stress conditions, but they might show slightly lower performance on certain cognitive tasks under normal low-stress conditions. On the other hand, if you inherit the MET version, you have a low-activity enzyme leading to slower dopamine breakdown and therefore higher baseline dopamine levels in the prefrontal cortex. These individuals, sometimes called warriors, may have a cognitive advantage under normal conditions, perhaps excelling at tasks requiring sustained focus, but they can be potentially more susceptible to anxiety and the negative effects of stress when dopamine levels rise too high, as there's less capacity to clear it quickly.
Wow, so it's a trade-off. Neither is strictly better.
Exactly. There's no single optimal state here. Each variant comes with its own set of potential advantages and disadvantages, depending entirely on the environmental context and the specific task demands. It highlights the flaw in seeking a single, optimized brain state.
Any other examples?
Oh, plenty. Variations in the serotonin transporter gene, 5-HTT, specifically a polymorphism called 5-HTTLPR, affect how efficiently serotonin is cleared from the synapse after its release. Individuals carrying the short allele of this gene variant tend to have less efficient serotonin reuptake. This variation has been famously linked, though it's complex and debated, to a potentially higher susceptibility to developing depression, but specifically in response to experiencing significant stressful life events. It interacts with the environment.
So genetics isn't destiny, but it sets a predisposition.
It sets a landscape, a predisposition, a likely response pattern, and then there are genetic variations in various dopamine receptor genes like DRD2 and DRD4. These can influence an individual's sensitivity to rewards, their propensity for novelty-seeking behaviors, and even their vulnerability to developing addictions. Some variants are linked to higher impulsivity, others to lower motivation.
So a key takeaway for us listening is,
The key takeaway for you, the listener, is that these inherent genetic factors establish your fundamental neurochemical landscape. They significantly influence your baseline mood, your personality traits, and critically, they dictate how you will likely respond to any intervention, whether it's a medication prescribed by a doctor, a specific dietary change you try, a particular type of exercise, or even a meditation practice. This is precisely why a truly personalized approach, one that ideally considers your unique biology — the genetic testing for this is still in its early days and often misinterpreted — is so vital and often far more effective than following generic advice or the latest biohacking trend found online. Your brain is absolutely not a blank slate, and understanding its unique, genetically influenced wiring is the crucial first step towards supporting it effectively.
It really sounds like maybe most popular biohacking ideas fall squarely into this trap of oversimplification then. Trying to boil down incredibly complex things like mood or focus to just one chemical, one pathway, one simple fix. Is that why so many of these quick fix promises ultimately disappoint or don't work long term?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, you've hit on a core philosophical and scientific issue with much of the popular biohacking discourse. It's often built on a foundation of scientific reductionism. That's the idea that a complex system, like the brain, can be fully understood and effectively controlled simply by manipulating its individual parts in isolation. This frequently leads to that oversimplified narrative we keep coming back to. The idea that mood or focus or anxiety can be fixed by just topping up a single supposedly deficient neurotransmitter or blocking a single bad enzyme. Unfortunately, this view fundamentally misunderstands the nature of neurobiology.
How so? Why is that view wrong?
Because the brain is not a simple chemical reservoir that you can manually adjust with a precise dose, like adding oil to a car engine. It is an incredibly complex, dynamic, and profoundly homeostatic ecosystem. Homeostatic means it's constantly striving to maintain its own internal balance. Neurotransmitter systems are tightly interconnected and intricately self-regulating through countless feedback loops, checks, and balances that have evolved over millennia.
So if you push one thing, something else pushes back.
Often, yes. Artificially pushing one system too far or too hard in one direction, say by flooding it with a precursor supplement or blocking its reuptake too strongly, frequently causes unpredictable and often undesirable compensatory changes in other interconnected systems as the brain tries to regain its equilibrium. For example, if you artificially boost levels of one neurotransmitter, your brain might respond by downregulating the sensitivity or number of its receptors, making the system less responsive over time. Or it might alter the activity of opposing systems to counteract the effect. It's always trying to get back to its preferred balance point.
So the goal shouldn't be just more dopamine or more serotonin.
Exactly. The true goal, from a biological perspective, should not be to artificially maximize any single chemical, but rather to support the entire system's capacity to maintain a healthy adaptive equilibrium across a wide range of conditions. It's about enhancing resilience and flexibility, not forcing a specific state. This directly opposes the often implicit more is better logic that fuels many simplistic biohacking approaches. It's about supporting the complex, interconnected system's ability to regulate itself, not about hijacking one component. Tag 4.3 risks and ethical considerations in the age of DIY biology.
So when people do try to hack their biology, maybe taking supplements or using devices based on these oversimplified ideas without truly understanding these complexities, these feedback loops, their own genetics, what are the potential dangers or risks involved? Beyond just wasting money or not getting the promised results, could it actually be harmful?
This brings up a really crucial point, and yes, the risks can be considerable, ranging from mild side effects to potentially serious harm. The DIY biohacking movement, almost by definition, often operates largely outside the established frameworks of traditional scientific research and regulated medical practice. This means it frequently lacks the rigorous ethical review, the standardized safety protocols, and the objective oversight that govern formal scientific research and the development of clinical treatments, all of which are specifically designed to protect individuals from harm.
What kind of risks are we talking about?
Well, several kinds. It can lead to the promotion and widespread use of interventions that are completely unproven, based on flimsy evidence or misinterpreted science, or are sometimes outright unsafe. It significantly facilitates the rapid spread of scientific misinformation and pseudoscience, which can have real public health consequences when people trust it over evidence-based advice. And critically, perhaps most concerningly, it puts individuals with genuine, serious medical or psychiatric conditions at significant risk if it encourages them to forego or delay effective, evidence-based treatments recommended by healthcare professionals in favor of pursuing unproven, unregulated hacks.
And it's hard to regulate this space, I imagine.
Extremely difficult. While regulatory bodies like the FDA in the United States technically have jurisdiction over supplements and certain devices, the sheer volume of products, the often ambiguous claims made, and the global nature of online commerce make effective enforcement incredibly challenging. This leaves a large regulatory gray area where potentially risky products and practices can proliferate, leaving public health vulnerable.
And fundamentally, this idea of optimizing is flawed anyway.
Exactly. We have to remember the very concept of optimizing neurochemistry towards a single universally ideal state is scientifically flawed from the outset. The existence of those genetic trade-offs we discuss, like with the COMT gene, clearly demonstrates that there is no single optimal neurochemical state that is advantageous in all possible contexts or for all possible goals. What might be optimal for intense, focused, calm, analytical work might be decidedly suboptimal for creative brainstorming, spontaneous social interaction, or rapidly responding to an unexpected emergency. Trying to force the brain into one predetermined ideal state ignores this essential need for flexibility and the evolutionary wisdom encoded in our genetic diversity.
So if optimization is the wrong goal, what's a better way to think about it?
A much more scientifically accurate, safer, and ultimately more achievable goal is not forced optimization, but the support of homeostatic resilience. This reframes the objective entirely. It's not about hacking the system to achieve some predetermined, potentially artificial state. Instead, it's about providing the system your unique brain and body with the fundamental resources, the healthy inputs, like good nutrition, sleep, exercise, stress management, social connection, and the right environmental cues it needs to effectively maintain its own natural adaptive balance in the face of the diverse and constantly changing demands of life. It's about empowering your brain's innate capacity to self-regulate, not trying to override it based on incomplete information or unrealistic ideals. #tag outro.
Wow. We have journeyed deep into the brain's incredible chemical symphony today, and what a truly fascinating and sometimes surprising ride it's been. We clarified that dopamine isn't just pleasure, it really drives motivation, learning, goal pursuit, acting as the brain's crucial, pay attention, this is important, signal. Serotonin, on the other hand, emerged as the master stabilizer, absolutely crucial for mood balance, sleep, appetite, even sociality, creating that predictable internal environment we need.
And we busted some myths, too. While endorphins provide that profound pain relief and contribute to pleasure, we saw how the classic runner's high euphoria is likely driven more by those brain-penetrating endocannabinoids.
Right. And maybe most importantly, we've seen how these systems don't operate in isolation. They're constantly interacting, influencing each other in this intricate dance. Dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, endocannabinoids, GABA, all contributing to an emergent state of well-being that is far, far more complex than any single chemical could ever explain.
Absolutely. And that leads to the verdict on hacking this complex machinery, which is, as we've discussed, really nuanced. Your neurochemistry is not infinitely malleable clay to be molded at will, nor is it a simple system amenable to crude, one-dimensional interventions or quick fixes. Your unique genetics set profound baseline tendencies and limits on what's possible or even desirable. And those simplistic more is better approaches can easily disrupt the delicate homeostatic balance that is the true hallmark of mental health and adaptive function. It really is about working with your biology, understanding its complexity, not fighting against it or trying to force it into a narrow box.
However, and this is the empowering part, this doesn't mean we're just passive observers, completely at the mercy of our biochemistry. Far from it. The evidence is clear and incredibly compelling. Your neurochemical landscape is profoundly responsive to targeted, consistent, evidence-based lifestyle interventions. The most effective, sustainable strategies are rarely found in those exotic pills, unproven supplements, or futuristic-sounding devices advertised online. They're found in the consistent application of behaviors that align deeply with our evolutionary biology.
That's right. Things like a balanced whole foods diet that considers macronutrient effects and precursor availability, a regular routine of physical activity that suits your body and you actually enjoy, ensuring sufficient exposure to natural light, especially in the morning, to anchor your vital circadian rhythms, and crucially, cultivating and prioritizing meaningful social connection. These aren't just nice-to-haves, they are the fundamental pillars supporting your biochemical well-being.
So maybe the final thought for you, our listener, to take away from this deep dive is this. Knowing that your neurochemistry is this dynamic, interconnected system, shaped profoundly by both your unique genetic blueprint and your daily choices. What single change, maybe something small but consistent, based on the science we've explored today, might you consider making? Not to hack yourself, but to better support your own natural homeostatic resilience.
How might understanding these subtle chemical shifts, these intricate interactions, empower you to listen more closely, perhaps more kindly, to the signals from your own body and mind? Moving away from the allure of simplistic hacks and towards genuine, sustainable, biologically informed well-being.
That's definitely a powerful question to ponder, something to truly think about as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you feel more informed, maybe a little surprised by some of the science, and perhaps even inspired to approach your own well-being with a newfound scientific appreciation and a healthy dose of critical thinking. We'll see you next time.